Could the reason your manifestation hasn't appeared be because you looked for it too soon? What if everything you've imagined is already forming, quietly, precisely, but your need to check, to share, or to seek proof interrupted the process? You've heard Dr. Joe Dispenza speak about energy, the quantum field, elevated emotion. You may have practiced the visualizations, the meditations, the morning routines, and yet something might still feel incomplete, as if there's a missing step, something that makes the difference between imagining a better life and actually living it. In this video, we'll explore the part that often goes unspoken, the role of silence, secrecy, and timing in manifestation. Neville Goddard spoke about this often, though it's not always what people focus on. He said, "Do not discuss your ambitions or desires with others, for their opinions will influence your faith." That isn't just a poetic warning. It's a description of how attention, yours and others, can shape or dissolve the unseen reality you're creating. By the end of this video, you'll understand why keeping your desires private gives them more power, how the space between assumption and physical manifestation is not emptiness, but transformation, what modern consciousness science is beginning to reveal about the role of the observer, and how to maintain belief without needing constant signs from the outside world. We'll also look at why synchronicity appears only when you're not chasing it, and how early dopamine spikes from oversharing can actually replace the drive you need to persist. If you've ever shared a dream and felt it lose energy afterward, if you've been asking, "Why isn't it happening?" or if you're simply tired of pushing and want to understand how to let things unfold without effort, this will clarify a lot. The power of secrecy in manifestation. There's a reason ancient mystics, inventors, and even some of the world's most successful people have one thing in common. They keep their biggest visions to themselves, at least in the beginning. Neville Goddard put it simply, "Do not discuss your ambitions or desires with others." Why? Because when you share a desire too early, especially before it's emotionally solid within you, you allow the beliefs, doubts, and energy of others to interfere with your inner state. In the realm of consciousness, attention is currency, and when you place your attention on explaining your desire rather than assuming it, you're spending that currency before anything has been built. Here's what often happens. You imagine something beautiful. You feel the shift, you're clear, aligned, excited. Then you talk about it, you tell a friend. They nod, maybe they support you, or maybe they don't. Even if they do, their questions begin to chip away at the certainty you had just hours ago. Suddenly, it becomes an idea again, not a knowing. There's also the chemical side. Neuroscience tells us that when we speak about our goals, especially with emotion, we get a small dopamine release. That reward signal makes us feel as if we've already accomplished something, but that dopamine high can reduce your motivation to persist. The brain believes something has been completed, and so the energy drops. This is why so many people start strong, visualize, affirm, plan, and then drift away. The energy was spent in explanation instead of creation. Now let's bring this closer to home. Have you ever told someone your goal with excitement only to feel uncertain the next day? Have you ever noticed that your motivation faded after you made it public? These aren't coincidences. The early exposure to outside opinions, or even just the act of making something verbal too soon, can pull your consciousness out of the assumed state. Think of your desire like a candle flame in a drafty room. When it's still new, it needs protection from the wind. Attention, doubt, and outside observation are those gusts. Your job is to shelter the flame until it becomes steady, until it lights the entire room. Neville's approach wasn't about secrecy for secrecy's sake. It was about preserving the energy of the assumption. He understood that the real power is in inward attention, not outward approval. So what can you do? Write down your assumption. Carry it within. Let it grow in silence. Return to it often, not to talk about it, but to feel it more clearly. Let your life speak louder than your words. Let results reveal themselves without prior announcement. The ones who create the most dramatic shifts don't shout their desires. They embody them, and they understand something vital. When your inner world is strong enough, the outer world has no choice but to match it. Silence isn't avoidance, it's alignment. For decades, spiritual teachers like Neville Goddard have told us that imagination creates reality. But now, consciousness researchers and neuroscientists are starting to say something remarkably similar. One of the lesser-known figures in this field is Jacobo Grinberg, a Mexican neurophysiologist who spent years studying the relationship between the brain, perception, and reality itself. His work points to something Neville always taught. What we call reality isn't fixed. It's a field of infinite potentials, shaped by our own consciousness. Grinberg called it the neuronal field, a kind of invisible matrix where all possibilities exist. According to his theory, our brain doesn't simply observe reality, it selects and organizes it through intention and expectation. This idea matches Neville's claim that the world is yourself pushed out. You're not passively receiving the world around you. You're actively participating in forming it. Think of your consciousness like a lens. If the lens is fogged by doubt, past conditioning, or fear, what you perceive will match that. But if it's clear and directed, if you hold a new assumption with feeling and repetition, the field begins to shift around you to reflect it. In other words, your beliefs and assumptions aren't responding to reality. They're formatting it. This is not metaphor. Brain scans show that when people imagine a future event with strong emotion, the brain fires in patterns nearly identical to real-life experience. From the brain's point of view, it is happening. And if your subconscious accepts it as real, it begins to look for and create matching experiences. This is why Neville emphasized the importance of dwelling in the end, not talking about it, not wishing for it, but feeling it real over and over until it feels natural. And the less you seek confirmation from the outside world, the more powerfully your consciousness imprints itself onto this field of potentials. Now consider, if your imagination is always projecting, what are you projecting when you're anxious, when you're checking for signs, when you're doubting what you've already imagined? This is why silence, faith, and repetition are not just practices, they're precision tools. They steady your lens and they allow your internal blueprint to override the habitual patterns of the past. Grinberg disappeared mysteriously in 1994. Some believe he had tapped into something so unusual, so disruptive to conventional understanding, that his life took a strange turn. Regardless of what happened to him, the work he left behind lines up with what mystics like Neville taught all along. Reality is not something out there. It's something happening through you. The real shift doesn't happen when your world changes. It happens when your attention changes. Internal frequency shapes reality. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly felt the mood, without anyone saying a word, you've already experienced what we call internal frequency. Neville Goddard taught that the world is a mirror, reflecting not just what we do, but what we are. And what we are, moment to moment, is a sum of our thoughts, feelings, assumptions, and emotional tone. Your internal frequency isn't just an idea. It's the baseline vibration that attracts your experiences. This is why repeating affirmations without emotional involvement rarely works. The words may be positive, but if your emotional tone contradicts them, your subconscious doesn't register the change. Neville put it plainly, it is not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe to be true. To influence your reality, the frequency of your emotions must align with the outcome you desire. Not in the future. Now. You cannot want abundance while vibrating in lack. You cannot seek love while emotionally anchored in loneliness. This alignment isn't about pretending or forcing a mood. It's about tuning into a version of yourself where the desire is already natural. The version of you who already has what they once longed for doesn't vibrate with need. They vibrate with certainty, peace, and gratitude. What does that version of you feel when they wake up in the morning? How do they walk into a room? How do they think about money, or health, or love? If that state feels distant, the work isn't in chasing the outcome. It's in shifting the feeling. In doing so, your frequency changes and your life begins to catch up. Neville described this as living in the end. Not imagining you will become it, but knowing you already are. When your body, mind, and breath begin to match the energy of what you say you want, you stop sending mixed signals to the field. Everything begins to respond. Your job isn't to force outcomes. Your job is to embody the state that makes those outcomes inevitable. There's a natural urge to share something when it feels exciting. A breakthrough idea, a clear vision, a goal that finally feels within reach. But when it comes to manifestation, speaking too soon can quietly sabotage what you're building. It's not about being secretive out of fear. It's about understanding the psychological and energetic effects of exposure. When you share your goals or desires before they become fully established in your imagination, you open the door to feedback, both spoken and unspoken. Even a simple question like, "How are you going to do that?" can introduce uncertainty. Someone else's doubt doesn't have to be direct to affect you. Their energy alone can influence the fragile structure of your new state of consciousness. Neville warned about this. He said that your inner state must become more real to you than anything the outer world suggests. Premature sharing can shift your focus outward, into explanation, defense, and justification, when what you need most is inner stillness and assumption. Then there's the neurological piece. When you talk about your dreams with emotional enthusiasm, your brain releases dopamine. That hit of reward gives you a sense of achievement, but nothing has actually changed. You've only spoken about it, not assumed it fully, not persisted in it silently. This early reward can trick the mind into thinking the work is done. The intensity of your commitment fades. The desire becomes an idea again, something you talked about rather than embodied. Think back. Have you ever told someone about something you planned to do, something you felt genuinely excited about, and then found yourself less motivated the next day, less committed? That's the effect of premature satisfaction. The body believes it has already received, so the follow-through weakens. This doesn't mean you should isolate yourself. It means you choose discernment. Speak only when the vision has taken root within you, when it has become stable, emotionally familiar, unshakable. Neville didn't teach silence as a form of hiding. He taught it as a form of power, a space where the imagined state could mature, deepen, and begin to impress itself on the subconscious without interruption. Let the results speak. Let your world shift quietly, and let your faith grow stronger than your need to explain. Before we move on, let me ask you something. What would change in your life if you replaced just one limiting belief with a new truth, one that actually served you? Sometimes, all it takes is a single line, a sentence that lands at the right time, in the right state, and something shifts. If you're drawn to Neville's work and want to keep your mind anchored in these ideas, check the pinned comment. There's something there you might want to keep close. Neville Goddard often emphasized the power of imagination, but there's a part of that teaching many overlook. Imagination is most powerful when it's unobserved, when it remains untouched by outer validation, analysis, or doubt. In our modern culture, there's pressure to share everything. We're taught to post our goals, track our progress, and announce our plans. But this habit trains the mind to seek confirmation before the desire has fully matured. It pulls your imagination into the realm of measurement, where it's subjected to comparison, timelines, and questioning. Neville taught that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. But that persistence doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet, in the privacy of the inner world, where you can imagine freely, without resistance. This is where the real transformation begins. When you imagine something and keep it to yourself, you protect its frequency. You don't invite your own critical mind to dissect it. You don't expose it to the world's logic. You allow it to live, breathe, and take form, untouched. This is what we call the unobserved imagination. It's like planting a seed and refusing to dig it up to check its growth. You assume the seed knows what to do, and you trust the soil. The same is true with desire. Once you've imagined the scene, once you've felt the outcome is real, your job isn't to prove it, it's to let it live undisturbed. You might be tempted to look for signs, to check if it's working, but that checking is a form of disbelief. It's the mind trying to control what was meant to be left in stillness. Neville called this living in the end. And when you truly live in the end, you no longer seek evidence. You are no longer hoping. You are no longer asking. You are being. There's a quiet confidence that develops when you imagine without sharing. A feeling that says, it is done. You no longer need anyone to agree with you. You no longer need to convince yourself. The inner world becomes your proof. And ironically, when the desire finally materializes, it often feels unsurprising. You recognize it as something familiar, something you've already lived 100 times in your imagination. Let others look for signs. Let others question their progress. You don't need to. You've already seen the end. You've felt it, walked through it, made peace with it. That's the hidden power of unobserved imagination. It doesn't just manifest outcomes. It transforms you into the version of yourself who no longer needs the outcome to feel complete. One of the greatest misunderstandings in manifestation is the delay between imagining something and seeing it show up. For many, that gap creates anxiety, doubt, even resignation. But Neville Goddard taught that the delay isn't a sign that nothing is happening. It's the space where everything is happening. He said, an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. But he also reminded us that everything appears in its own appointed hour. That interval, that delay, is not punishment, it's preparation. Your subconscious must first accept the new state as natural, not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a present identity. The delay allows that shift to take place. It gives your internal world time to adjust to the new assumption. Without it, manifestation would collapse under an unstable self-concept. Think of the delay loop as a recalibration. The reality you want is already formed in the unseen, but unless you become the version of yourself who can receive and hold it, it will remain out of reach. The gap is where that becoming happens. This is why Neville placed so much importance on persistence. Not emotional effort or physical work, but quiet, inner persistence, returning to the state of the wish fulfilled over and over, regardless of outer evidence. That is what stabilizes your identity and allows the desire to materialize without resistance. Now this is where most people give up. They look for signs, don't see them, and conclude that nothing is working. But that interpretation itself resets the loop. It sends a new signal to the subconscious that says, "This is not mine yet." And so the outer world holds back. Instead, use the delay as reinforcement. Revisit the inner scene. Speak from the version of yourself who already has the result. Revise your memories to match your new state. Let the delay become a practice space, an emotional gym where you build the feeling of certainty. When you stop needing the outcome to validate your assumption, it often arrives quietly, naturally, not because you forced it, but because you finally matched it. Neville reminded us, you do not attract what you want, you attract what you are, and becoming is a process. The delay is not the absence of results. It is the unfolding of identity. The gap is the gift. It gives you the time to become someone who no longer waits. Now let's enter the flow state. There is a moment in consciousness where effort dissolves. You are no longer trying to manifest, no longer watching the clock or counting signs. You are simply present, connected, and available to life. This is the flow state. Flow isn't just for athletes or artists. It is a natural state of being when your mind is no longer chasing outcomes and your body is no longer bracing for disappointment. It's the space where inner and outer align, because there's no interference, only awareness. Neville hinted at this when he said, "Be still and know that you are." Stillness is not passivity. It's an active state of allowing, a deep inner calm that says, "I have assumed the end. I no longer need to control the middle." In flow, resistance falls away. The imagination becomes sharper. Ideas arrive without struggle, and manifestations begin to feel less like events and more like movements, natural, unforced. What disrupts flow is obsession, checking, needing, grasping. These create friction in the field. They pull your consciousness out of the state of the wish fulfilled and into a state of lack, where you are waiting rather than knowing. To enter flow, you must let go of needing proof, let go of timelines. You don't force belief. You settle into it, the way you settle into a favorite chair, comfortable, familiar, still. This state isn't rare. It's just rarely noticed because it's quiet. There's no drama in flow, no performance, just alignment. And when you live in that alignment, the outer world begins to shape itself without resistance. Actions feel inspired, not forced. Decisions become clear. The right people and opportunities begin to appear, not because you chase them, but because your state made room for them. You stop being the one who makes things happen. You become the one they happen through. Synchronicity is a sign. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is alignment made visible. Neville Goddard didn't use the word synchronicity, but he described its essence. When you dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, without forcing, without doubting, you begin to notice things that seem to confirm your assumption. Unexpected calls, perfect timing, sudden opportunities. These are not random, they are reflections. But here's what most people misunderstand. Synchronicity does not appear when you're chasing it. It appears when you no longer need it to appear. When your inner state has become stable enough that you no longer require outer validation, the outer world begins to respond in kind. Synchronicity shows up in the absence of resistance. It is the echo of certainty. The quieter your inner questioning becomes, the louder these signs seem to get. And when they arrive, they feel natural. Not surprising, not shocking, but familiar. Because you've already lived the experience within, the moment feels like a return, not a discovery. If you are seeing no signs, ask yourself, are you truly assuming the end, or are you waiting for proof before you believe? That distinction changes everything. Synchronicity is not there to convince you. It is there to remind you that your assumption has already taken root. You are not making something happen. You are watching something unfold. You must rewrite the inner narrative. Every belief you hold about yourself was once a story, repeated, accepted, and eventually lived. Most of these stories were not chosen consciously. They were inherited, picked up in childhood, shaped by environment, repeated through habit. Over time, they became identity. Neville Goddard taught that your outer world is nothing more than your inner conversations made visible. The things you say to yourself when no one is listening form the structure of your life. And if your story is one of limitation, scarcity, or doubt, that is what you will continue to see no matter how much you visualize something different. This is why repetition is not optional. It is essential, not as a routine but as a tool for rewriting the script. To live in a new state, you must rehearse it emotionally and mentally. You must create new inner dialogues that match the reality you desire, not once but again and again, until the new story feels more natural than the old one. Neville's method of revision is one of the most direct ways to do this. He suggested that you take past events that contradict your desired identity and mentally rewrite them, not to deny what happened, but to recondition the emotional pattern they created. When you revise a memory, you are not erasing the event. You are erasing its power to shape your present. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what was and what is imagined with feeling. It only responds to the dominant story. And the story is yours to choose. You are not bound to your past. You are bound to the story you keep telling about it. Change the narrative, and the present begins to shift, not just in feeling, but in form. You are always telling a story. The only question is it the one you want to live? Embrace non-resistance. There is a subtle truth in the art of manifestation that often slips past even the most dedicated practitioners. It's not about visualizing harder, scripting longer, or meditating more intensely. The key isn't in doing more, it's in releasing the grip, in letting go of the emotional weight that surrounds the desire. This is what Neville Goddard called non-resistance. Non-resistance is not passivity. It is not indifference. It is not giving up. It is the quiet confidence that what you have assumed is already unfolding, without your constant interference. Many people misunderstand this. They assume that letting go means abandoning the desire, as if surrendering it means forgetting it. But Neville never taught abandonment. He taught assumption. And once the assumption is made, once the state is felt and embodied, there is nothing more to get. There is only the allowing of what already is. To resist is to hold the desire at arm's length. Resistance often hides beneath effort, especially when that effort is charged with urgency or anxiety. When you're visualizing not because you're in alignment, but because you're afraid it won't happen. When you're repeating affirmations with a clenched jaw, rather than a relaxed heart. When you're checking for signs every few hours and interpreting silence as failure. These are all symptoms of resistance. They may look like devotion, but underneath them is a single, quiet belief. It's not here yet, and it might not come. Neville explained that imagining creates reality, not when the imagination is frantic or desperate, but when it is still, clear, and natural. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption. Not force it. Not chase it. Persist. This is where non-resistance becomes essential. It is the field in which your assumption is nurtured, the space where it grows without interruption. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are living from the truth that it already has. To understand this more clearly, imagine a bow and arrow. The more you pull back the string, the more energy is built. But if you never let go, the arrow cannot fly. Resistance is the hand that never releases the string. It gathers tension, but never allows movement. Non-resistance is the moment you let go, not in defeat, but in trust. In daily life, this may look like holding the vision internally, while allowing the external world to unfold in its own rhythm. You may go days without thinking about the desire directly, not because you've forgotten it, but because it has become a part of your natural self-concept. It no longer feels foreign. You are not chasing it. You are simply being the version of yourself who has it. This emotional detachment is not cold. In fact, it is deeply warm. It's a soft, unwavering belief that doesn't need to be proven in every moment. It's the difference between clinging to a hope and resting in a knowing. Gratitude is a powerful companion to non-resistance. When you feel grateful before the manifestation has physically arrived, you are signaling to your subconscious that it has arrived, at least in the realm that matters most. Gratitude doesn't beg, it doesn't plead, it doesn't question, it confirms. Many block their manifestations by constantly revisiting the same mental loop. Is it working? When will it happen? What else do I need to do? These questions seem harmless, but they are declarations of resistance. They imply that your assumption is weak, unformed, or insufficient. Neville was clear. You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe this is the only reason you do not see it. Belief must become quiet, steady, lived, not shouted from the rooftops, not constantly re-examined. Belief, when it is real, carries no urgency. It just is. Let's return to the analogy of placing an order at a restaurant. Once the request is made, you do not rush the kitchen, interrogate the chef, or question the waiter every 5 minutes. You sit, you relax, you trust the process, you expect it to arrive, and the more natural that expectation feels, the faster the delivery seems to come. In the same way, non-resistance allows life to respond. When you create the emotional space for the desire to arrive, it does so with ease. Not because the desire suddenly becomes possible, but because you have stopped preventing it. This doesn't mean doing nothing. Action will still happen, but it will be inspired, not forced. You won't need to push yourself. The next step will feel obvious, clear, sometimes even effortless. That's what happens when your inner state is aligned and unburdened by tension. In non-resistance, you are no longer the one trying to control the manifestation. You are the one allowing it. And that shift, from effort to allowance, is the final step that turns assumption into experience. Let go of the strain. Stop managing the outcome. You've already imagined it. You've already felt it. That's enough. Now let it in. Conclusion: you are already it. The real secret isn't in doing more. It's in assuming more deeply, until your inner state becomes so stable it no longer needs the world's confirmation. Neville Goddard said, "You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe this is the only reason you do not see it." All manifestation flows from this one truth. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are learning to let go of the idea that it hasn't. Throughout this video, you've seen why silence protects the integrity of your desire. You've understood how early sharing dissipates momentum. You've learned that your subconscious accepts what you repeat, especially when it's emotionalized and imagined without resistance. You've also seen how the delay is not a problem, but a necessary space for identity to shift, and how entering flow, trusting in synchronicity, and releasing control allow what you've assumed to move freely into form. Now the question is simple. Can you stop interfering with what's already yours? You don't need to convince others. You don't need to convince yourself over and over. The work is quiet now. It's in holding the state with consistency and letting the world rearrange. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to explain. If the inner scene feels real to you, if you've lived it in imagination and allowed yourself to feel its truth, then it is already set in motion. Let others wonder. Let results come in their own time. You are no longer trying to become. You are being. As Neville taught, assumption is creation. And once you've assumed it, you don't reach for it anymore. You let it unfold, quietly, naturally, without resistance. And it will, because it must. Before you go, if you're ready to let Neville reshape your thinking in ways you haven't yet considered, check the pinned comment. There's something waiting for you there.